Well, of course, the people of Rafah in southern Gaza are being encouraged to leave the city by the Israeli army ahead of an operation. It's unclear what sort of scale that operation might be on. They have distributed leaflets telling people to go to so-called safety humanitarian zones. But of course, it's not easy for the very old or the sick to leave Rafah and head to those places. Well, we're going to talk now to Scott Lucas in Birmingham in the United Kingdom. Scott, Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute in University College Dublin. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps we could start. Do we know how many people have left? What sort of numbers of people have left Rafah after these leaflets were distributed, and knowing that there could be an attack at any time?
No, Angela, we do not know at this point how many of the estimated 1.4 million people may have left Rafah. And of course, 1.4 million people, that's about 2/3 of the Strip's population. The Israelis said they wanted to get 100,000 people to evacuate, but they did not provide details about the evacuation corridors, about any logistics on the ground. And of course, it's very dangerous to be reporting from Rafah right now. It's hard to get reliable information because the Israeli airstrikes are ongoing. So I think we can simply say that even if some people have left Rafah, there's still well more than 1 million people who are there and who will be at risk if there's any ground invasion.
Now, these humanitarian zones have been widely criticised. It's been said they're not workable. Can you give us an idea? What are the criticisms? What is wrong with this plan?
Well, the first thing, Angela, is that since October the 7th, as we go into the 8th month of the conflict, the Israelis keep shifting where the humanitarian zones are. You viewers might remember that initially people were told to leave northern Gaza to go to central and southern Gaza. Then at the end of 2023, the Israelis expanded operations into central Gaza. People were told to go to southern Gaza. When the Israelis attacked Khan Younis, which is also in the south of Gaza, they then said, we'll go to Rafah. But secondly, the problem here is that even if you manage to get out of Rafah right now, that the airstrikes are not in a controlled fashion. You know, they're not just simply targeting specific Hamas locations. So you are at risk of being struck if you get out. Secondly, if you do try to get out, will you have shelter? Will you be able to get sufficient food, sufficient supplies? Because, of course, aid is very limited in these areas. And thirdly, we have had disruptions to efforts which have been made by NGOs to try to provide some type of assistance in the area, because more than 200 of them have been killed by Israeli operations. So, you know, this is not a humanitarian corridor which is secure, even assuming that we had some type of organized process for an evacuation.
If you look at this from the Israeli point of view, when I talk to contacts in Israel, there is a feeling that the United Nations is, in their words, not cooperating with this. Well, you, of course, pointed out that a number of UN personnel have been killed throughout this war. There is something of a breakdown of relations. Let's not go into the UNRWA special issue. But how does it work in other wars? How is it that it is not possible to provide a safe humanitarian area? Presumably, Israeli leaders do not want to be charged with war crimes afterwards. Presumably, they would like to make that happen. Why isn't it working? Is the UN cooperating?
Because, first of all, yes, the UN is cooperating, Angela, and we can discuss the Israeli propaganda campaign against the UN, including the Relief and Works Agency, which has gone on for months. But to get to the specifics, we have a tension here between a desire to get aid in secure areas through what are called deconfliction arrangements. So some agencies work with the Israelis and say, look, we're operating here. Please don't attack these areas. And that conflict with Israel's intentions, which is we will strike anywhere in Gaza where we think we might be able to kill Hamas personnel. And to be honest with you, civilians are effectively, well, they may be caught up in this, because we know from Israeli sources sources inside Israel, including current and former Israeli officials, that the rules on engagement have been relaxed, that the Israelis are not observing the type of rules of engagement we have seen in previous conflicts. So, to give you one pointed example, when those 7 workers from the World Central Kitchen, that US founded organization, were killed a few weeks ago that caused headlines, those 7 personnel were operating in a deconfliction area. They should have been safe. Their movements were notified to the Israeli military, but they were still attacked. So the arrangements simply are not holding because the Israelis are carrying out what is an open-ended war and not really accepting any types of limits on operations, even for the sake of delivering aid.
So what should happen? How might civilians' lives be saved while Hamas is rooted out from the tunnels under Rafah?
There should be a ceasefire. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. As an analyst, there should be a ceasefire. That's how you protect the civilians here. Now, the argument you'll get from the Israeli government will be, oh, but Hamas will still be in place there. We'll have to root them out. The fact here is that you go into the eighth month of operations, and you have not been able to destroy Hamas, just as you were not able to destroy Hamas in previous cycles of bombing and conflict in Gaza, which have gone on since the 1990s. Since the early 21st century. So to say that you're going to destroy Hamas here, well, that's a pipe dream. And in the meantime, what happens here is that you fail to do with what the international community told the Israelis soon after October 7th. If you want to deal with Hamas, because they did cross a line with those mass killings inside Israel, then you isolate them politically, economically, while ensuring Israeli security. But Israel did not choose to pursue the political and economic steps. It went in with the blunt military operations, and we are where we are with no end in sight.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you so much. Scott Lucas speaking to us there from Birmingham, Professor of United States and International Politics at University College Dublin. Thanks so much for your time, sir.